Gosh, to be in this world of retail, I feel like things have been shifting so much, so much so. I don't know if you guys heard the news, but and Taylor's coming into issues. A lot of big retailers are having a lot of problems these days, and we're doing our best in the retail industry to innovate and to pivot. And I think that it's important to address the fact that a lot of the issues that we're seeing in the retail business are really have to do with big companies, big companies that grew too fast, the big companies that didn't innovate, or have additional business models and revenue streams kind of ready to go. And I think that really is a testament to how we start to think about innovation and strategy. Now, today's conversation is all around collaboration, relationship building, and partnership planning. Thank you. It's nice to be back. And when we think about partnership planning and we think about networking, what's really important is, it's yes, for the purpose of business and for the purpose of, doing more business and better business. But ultimately, guys, when it comes to partnership planning, we're also looking at brainstorming additional revenue streams, looking at things from the perspective of, how are we going to get along in this new world, and what are the different ways in which we are growing and expanding and kind of getting into each other's landscapes. So I'll give you a good example here. This morning, I had a wonderful second conversation with someone who reached out to me on networking and partnership planning. And, it wasn't just a one and done phone call where you get on the phone with someone and you agree to do business. You have to build rapport. You have to understand, how does my business model fit with your business model? So relationships are not so transactional. And I think that that's really important to understand. It's beyond transactionality. In fact, the authenticity behind it means that the partnership will last. There are people who I carved early on partnerships in scaling retail that have honestly just become people who I've been, collaborating with and working with now for, 7-8 years. And that's pretty amazing, right? It's like, we know that we may not talk to each other all the time. But if we need something, if we need someone who's going to help support us in terms of a launch or an idea or brainstorming, we know that we have our people. And I think that that is a very important thing to think about is, who are your people? And your people will change, and they should change. And so the company that you keep in order to launch your business is likely going to be a different company than you're going to keep when your business has grown. And the reason why is when it comes to growing your business, you actually want to be working aspirationally, right? You need people who are kind of where you're at, but also striving to where you want to be. If your cohorts are the people who are not quite as far along or advanced as you are, then you might find yourself in a position of giving a lot of advice, but not necessarily getting help and getting advice. And so when you're looking at kind of the relationships that you're building as a networker, I think it's extremely important to ask yourself, am I leveling up, right? And that's why I think access to consultants, mentors, et cetera, becomes so important, because you actually really do need to have that kind of contrast to be able to learn and grow and have someone who pushes you. So either through your existing networks or through networks that you are paying for, you want to always be balancing. Yes, a certain level of mentorship is great because you can then teach and kind of reinforce the things that you know, but then also that second level of someone who's pushing you and driving you and teaching you something who's further along, I think is also super important. It's interesting. Someone was telling me the other day that, an ideal mentor is someone who is, I think they said like 10 to 15 years older than you, right? So someone who's, and that could be length of business, that could be age, but, someone who's not so much older that their application of information isn't quite as relevant, but someone who actually has, enough of being close to the ground to be able to actually see the progression and lifeline of how business has been changing, right? So close enough, not competitive, but close enough, and then not too far ahead. So those, I think, are important things to keep in mind. Now, again, when we're thinking about, today, and I just want to preface this with, last time, guys, when we were on live, you all saved your questions for the last like 5 minutes. And then it was like, oh my gosh, we had to like mad dash finish line to getting it done. So if you guys have questions about things in retail, strategy, business, marketing, etc., please ask. Even though the conversation is tailored towards relationship building and networking, I'd love to be able to facilitate other kinds of questions as well. So to kind of think about, again, this, how to network and do this properly, obviously everyone's saying, yeah, go on Instagram or go to these platforms and meet people. But it's hard. What does that mean to meet someone, right? What does networking mean kind of in this day of COVID and quarantine, et cetera? It's not exactly like we're all meeting for coffee. Now, you may or may not be an introvert. And if you are an introvert, then it's likely it'll be in your best interest to kind of carve out time so that you can say, okay, this week my goal is to, research a few people and then maybe align and see, how can I best support them? How can, is this inspirational? Is there an ask? How am I kind of in this relationship process generation? And start slow, and reach out. Hey, do you want to get on Zoom? Do you want to get on a phone call? Everyone's busy. It's funny to think that like everyone's kind of at home. No one's doing anything. In fact, guys, I think people are busier now than like ever before. Because we've got so much time, right? It's like we've got time to work on business ideas. We've got time to be with our families. We've got time to go to the vegetable garden, as I've been going to, which is kind of awesome. Time to cook more or do what you need. So I think that everyone actually is finding that there are other ways of leveraging and using time. And so assuming that, everyone's just kind of waiting around is incorrect. So as you're looking at bridging relationships, it's not simply a matter of, hey, can we get on a phone call tomorrow? Hey, when's a good time in the next few weeks? What's your availability like, right? How do we kind of best facilitate something and keep it short? It's not like you need an hour phone call. Maybe it's 15 minutes. If that 15 minutes goes great, maybe it's another 15 minutes. If it's not a good 15 minutes, then hey, you only wasted 15 minutes, right? So it's, I think that's important. I think the other thing to consider is, this is a crazy time in the world. People are depressed. People are lonely. We might be busy, right? Filling our time up with stuff to do. But a lot of people are having existential crises. You might be having an existential crisis. And so when you're showing up to these meetings and you're showing up with the perspective of collaboration, if you sound desperate or you sound fatalistic or you sound like the world is coming to an end, you're probably not going to make the best first impression. And I know that sounds pretty like simple, right? It's like, okay, duh. If I sound like a Debbie Downer, then I am going to come off as that, and someone may or may not be interested in collaborating or working with me. So your kind of mindset and how you're approaching everything is super important to be in the right frame of mind. If you're in the right frame of mind, then you're actually going out there with some positive vibes. You're going out there with the excitement and enthusiasm to be able to cultivate those relationships. So guys, I know it's a hard world out there. You're going to have to do something to flip your mindset in order to actually be successful at networking. Everyone is kind of coming to the table when it comes to networking and relationship building with mutual intent. There's an idea of building business, growing business. And we all want to do that, right? We want to do that with people who are like-minded. Sometimes I tell people when I'm interviewing them, it's not always about the jobs you take. Sometimes it's about the jobs you don't take. It's not about saying yes to every partnership. It's about saying yes to the right partnerships, to the right relationships. And if it's not mutually beneficial, or if it's not working for you, you don't get the impression that, you guys are both gaining, then you have to end those relationships, right? So when it comes to relationship building and networking, sometimes these are finite relationships. Sometimes they're there to help get you to the next level. Sometimes they become lifelong partnerships. But it's good to show up with kind of how you want to be seen in the world, right? It's always challenging right now to get on the phone with someone and, hey, how's it going? And sometimes someone will ask me that, how's it going? And I'll be like, it's okay. it's not great right now, but it's not too bad, right? And that's a very honest and authentic answer. As opposed to, hey, the world's on fire and what are we all doing and how are we managing? So your attitude and perspective is such an important thing to keep in mind as you are building and kind of growing your networked relationships. Now, the thing that I think is so important is no one, and this is why I think platforms like Embark are important and places where you can connect with others, because there's something that used to happen to me a lot, which was, hey, can I pick your brain, right? Like, oh, I'm in need of a mentor. I'm in need of someone who can answer my questions. And what I think is important to realize is if you have friends or networked groups where people are genuinely taking interest in you, that's amazing. You're basically getting access to free advice. Otherwise, for almost everyone else, it's kind of like it's a business, right? Make a business out of giving advice. So those kinds of networks where it's like, hey, I just want us to like get to know each other, but really I want to ask you for a lot of information and I want to network, but really it's more like consultation. I think that's a very important thing to consider. And I think that that's important to frame. Okay, so let's ask this question. What's the best way to open up your network out of your country? That's a really good point. So here are a couple really cool things. Like I remember when I was traveling a lot at this time. So I guess I'll give you the story and then I'll kind of give you maybe how I would approach it in like a COVID related environment. Every time I would travel around the world somewhere, I would make a point to meet people. And I would, so for example, go to Paris, amazing. I'd hit up all the fashion schools. Who's doing what? Who do I need to meet? What's happening? If I went to parts of India, what's going on in the industry there, all over the world, right? Wherever you are, there's an opportunity to network and meet people. You can either find that through like entrepreneurial groups, educational facilities, there's usually some sort of like, cohort of designers or brands or entrepreneurs who have, you can research and find access to. So guys, when we are able to travel, I highly suggest that any trip you take becomes a networking trip and becomes a trip where you broaden your horizon and you really look to seek relationships, right? I think relationships are important. Now, in terms of this COVID time period and where we're not able to necessarily travel, I can tell you, sending emails to people, going on LinkedIn is a great way to open up outside of your country. I think also, doing some research. So again, online guys, like you may not find something on page 1, it might be that what you find is on page like 2 or 3 of your Google search. But what you're really looking for is someone who's, let's say, a certain kind of brand. You might go into that local market's magazines and see who are the brands who are being covered in that magazine. So a lot of different ways of looking, I would say, at like what is the content that you are absorbing of that market, and then that should really give you some key indicators in terms of who are those brands or stylists or photographers they may want to be working with. The other thing that I find to be very helpful is asking your friends for recommendations of other people you can speak to in other countries or in other markets. The other day someone asked me, a friend was like, hey, our company is hiring, do you know anyone who can do this, this, and this, or we're looking to expand. Do you know anyone who would be a good resource or someone who I can talk to? So don't be afraid to ask for help from your existing peers or your cohorts. I think that that's very, very important. The other thing that's really cool is education. So I've currently been investing in my own education. I'm wrapping up a Harvard Business School class on disruptive innovation theory. I'm in the middle of a Columbia Business School class on negotiations and persuasion. And what's so fascinating is, yeah, it's online, it's on Zoom, and we have different ways of engaging. But guess what? Like now I've really had this amazing opportunity to actually connect with people all over the world who have similar interests. And I think that that's really cool. And I think that sometimes we don't we don't look for those commonalities. So if there are interest groups where you're taking some educational platform and you're furthering yourself right now, trust me, you're going to meet people all over the world who are also very interested in what it is that you're interested in. Okay, so that was that question. So guys, other questions around relationship building and networking. I would say that from a, practicality standpoint, it's going to take time. Give yourself time each week. Personally, I can be a bit of a hermit. So, unless I really carve out the time and say, okay, I'm going to research all the people, or I'm going to actually take a deep dive and look into something. It's kind of hard for me, right? It's like you have to really make the time. It's kind of like public relations. I am not good at PR because it's hard for me to go out there and make a lot of friends. But networking can be very valuable for you. And I would actually invite you guys on a challenge or on a journey with me to go and do some networking. I think that it's something that I too need to be focusing a bit more time on, and maybe I can start by doing that with one of the classes that I'm in and just spending a little bit more time. I've already started, but I think I could kind of push myself a little bit further. The other thing that I think is interesting is, if you are part of any groups, WhatsApp threads, it's really Slack groups. I'm also a member of the Female Founder Collective. There are so many different groups and organizations that I think are really designed to bridge community and really designed to help you network. And I think the one kind of really important piece of advice here when it comes to networking is it's not really just like a take. And it shouldn't be a platform where you're just advertising yourself. I think that's where you add the least amount of value. No one wants to be in that Facebook group where that one person is just promoting their own stuff. It comes off as very inauthentic. It comes off as not in the purpose of abundance or giving, right? It comes off in this very kind of scarcity, like, hey, I'm marketing to you guys. And honestly, we've all taken that class, right? We've all taken that marketing class that tells you to, go onto Facebook groups and post about your product. And guess what, guys? That shit does not work anymore. It's like the advice that we give clients now on marketing is not like, oh, go build the list and then market to the list, and then it's all about, the Facebook group and posting your stuff and, keep drumming down that hole. It actually, guys, those are the very same strategies that a lot of big businesses, big business owners are trying to become small businesses. So the fact that small business owners would try to be bigger business or try to be so advertising centric in these organic communities, I think is really awful. And I don't think it works. So when you're looking at kind of building community or you're looking at building a brand, it takes something that is a lot more in and of you unless you actually have the resources and the capital to hire people to create something authentic. But honestly, without that kind of consistent brand values, without those consistent messaging, networking on things like Facebook don't get you very far because you're just advertising. So think about authenticity. Think about showing up to the platforms where you actually are able to be consistent, and think about areas where you can add value, where you can really give back to community. I think that that's super important. For us, for me, for scaling retail, for us, a lot of it's been video content, right? How do you kind of create community through the content that we speak of? And, people really, they get to know what we're talking about, but, we've kind of purposefully never created a Facebook group, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, what would that look like to kind of create something like that? To me, it's a little intimidating. Okay, Jennifer, what's the best way to network? I would say right now, when it comes to bridging relationships, I would start to look for organizations that are deeply aligned with your values and your business. And I would say whether that is, and I would get very specific, meaning you don't just want to join an entrepreneurs network. You probably want to join an entrepreneur network, maybe for women in a certain market, right? You want to start by creating very personal one-on-one relationships with a community that you can be connected to. And I think that that is a really important, I think that's really important, right? You want to start with somewhere that you can actually relate to, where you're not just like a small fish in a big pond, where you're kind of maybe a small fish in a small pond and you guys are all kind of getting to know each other, right? You don't have to be a big fish, right? Being a big fish in the small pond means you need a bigger pond, right? So like if you find yourself as like a big fish in a small pond, then like you gotta like push yourself, because that's no fun place to be, right? It's like no one wants to be the best in their community. That's kind of boring. It's like you gotta push and grow yourself. And the best person to be is the dumbest person in the room, right? It's like then you really get to learn and grow a lot. So try that on, right? Try being the dumbest person in the room, and try that beginner's mentality. You'll find that you're able to absorb and learn a lot. YouTube comment here: my classes are a great place to meet people, learning, sharing ideas, relevant conversations. Thank you very much. Appreciate that love coming from YouTube. I think that the nature of community and connection is something that we're all deeply exploring during this time and space in the world. I think that how we choose to approach it is very important, but nonetheless, approaching it at all is simply critical for our own survival and our mental health. So if I can task you guys with, going out into the world and kind of finding a community digitally that really speaks to you, and that isn't just, entrepreneurs or just, hey, all fashion designers. It's like, oh my God, there's so many different kinds of designers who have all these different needs and who are in different markets. So like do some research. I'm not a directory, so I can't tell you what's going to fit for each and every one of you. But I can tell you that it exists, and I can tell you that it's out there. And I can also tell you that if you don't see it and find it, that might mean that you need to seek and create the community that you are and that you're looking for. And sometimes it's kind of identifying, this is what I need, and being very clear and specific about the kinds of relationships and communities you want to be a part of, and then being able to move forward in that capacity. All right, guys, that is all for me on relationships and networking and human connection and all of that. I'm always pleased, and it's always a pleasure to be here to be able to share information and share my thoughts. I think we're going to be doing another kind of Zoom Q&A sesh for an hour, which is really amazing. And if you guys want to sign up and get to talk more and get your questions answered, or hear me talk more, then please sign up to do it, because I think it'll be super fun. And then that last question, Michael, where do you look to find online? You got to go online. I'd say like go to your local library, but like a lot of people can't. So go online, search keywords, search specific keywords, right? Like long tail keywords, not like entrepreneurial focus group, but like in your neighborhood, right? Like who are these people? Find them, find another group on Facebook and be like, hey, who out here is interested in these things, right? Like who's kind of like create the rabbit holes, right? Go deep, dive into it. And what you'll find maybe will surprise you. And maybe it means that you are a reluctant leader if you don't see anything and you need to start your own thing. And hell yeah, like why not? This is the time to stretch ourselves, to be more to more people, to be more to ourselves, and to stand for community. And I think we can do that as being actively searching for community and finding it and engaging with it, and also creating it when we can't find what we're looking for. All right, guys, that's all for me. I'll talk to you later. Bye.